On this episode of Monica Mentors, we're going to discuss how our faith is shaped by different perspectives. But today we're going to deal with specifically the social media perspective. We're going to look at how one of the largest social media platforms, TikTok, has influenced the faith-based community. On today's episode, we're going to dive into how this platform has influenced the perception specifically of young people in attending church versus them just having online group conversations to help build their faith. We're going to discuss digital evangelism and how they use it. We're going to discuss the youthful engagement with these large platforms, specifically TikTok. We're going to talk about the balance between online and in-person worship, and for the most part, what's the perspective? Do some often feel that as long as they are having a conversation, whether it is in the house or in their home, is one more important than the other? Tune in for this conversation as we reveal the evolving relationship between social media and the modern day community called church. So, according to a recent survey, online church attendance has actually increased. The survey, according to the PewResearch.org organization, shared that 10% of U.S. adults reported that they actually do attend church in person. Another 16% said that they do shared. They do online and in person, whether that be consistently. That was just what the report showed that they do on a monthly or quarterly basis. The data that was a little interesting to me for this particular conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is that 63% of individuals chose nothing in particular as their religious preference. So not in person, not online. They just didn't have a preference at all. And again, that number was 63%. So overall, the report did show that the trend is not necessarily that people are going in person versus visiting online. There's just in a lot of cases, there's no conversation on it at all, was my takeaway from this particular report. And so what I did was I looked, and there was a user that I found on TikTok that shared several different opinions about what young people tend to think about the church. And he said that many people find that TikTok is more relatable and engaging than traditional church services. If you think about it, this has been a conversation oftentimes even across denominations. One of the running jokes that, one of my friends used to say, I want to go to a church because a lot of them, they have a 1 hour service. They're one and done. You go to a traditional black church, you're going to be there 3-4 hours, maybe 6, 3-4 days a week. And it just seemed like it was a routine. There are some who may just go in for mass and then they go home. There are some that have services that tend to combine elements of different things that are considered traditional. But for the most part, this user felt that most young people find that their preference for online religion falls a little bit more within the category of what they are looking for a community of believers. Now, I will tell you, I did visit a church this morning here in Atlanta. I was blown away because there were a ton of young people. They were actually standing in line to get into school. This church is housing a school here in Atlanta. And those young people were waiting, it seems like, for hours to get into the building. And so I do believe while there is a trend that shows through TikTok that a lot of people are preferring the online, but again, I physically saw with my own eyes today that there are individuals who are willing to stand to go into a service as well. Okay, so this same TikTok content platform they call Christian influencers, let me use the correct terminology per them, they feel that social media platforms often offer easier access to understand religious content. So they're able to navigate what God means, who Jesus was. They use different terms such as the universe. They are able to easily, their opinion, explore if you hear about Mary or Joseph or Moses or, different individuals that the Bible talks about. They feel they are easily able to do their own research at home online versus them being in the body, in the sanctuary of the church, trying to learn about these different individuals. Now, I will say, I've been in church for a long time. A lot of these individuals we learned about in Sunday school. So by the time we got into the main sanctuary, we did have an understanding of the different individuals that our pastor was teaching about. We also used to have youth groups that also expounded on the different teachings in person. And so that may be something that some individuals may want to explore if you are interested going in person. You may want to do some research on the different churches to make sure that those different things are available to you to kind of give you an alternate to just having to do the research on your own at home. I'm a researcher both ways. I like researching by myself, but I also like having dialogue with other individuals, because sometimes when I do talk to other people about different things that I didn't understand from the Bible, a lot of times they're able to give me a better interpretation and or understanding of content that's in the Bible as it relates to different stories. All right, so the same TikTok believer also said that they feel that online just is simply more convenient to engage with their faith from the comfort of their own home. I'm not saying it's a right or a wrong thing. I'm just saying we are addressing the topic, this modern day thinking that, again, more people prefer now to, as it seems, to stay at home and practice their religious beliefs versus going inside of a building with other individuals to do so. So an online platform creates a virtual community where some individuals feel more connected to share their beliefs. I know there are people, I've heard the terms there, some people may say, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. It just depends on what your preference is. Again, I like going into the body because I like being around individuals who believe and practice the same things that I believe. But this user is saying that there is the ability to do that in the virtual settings as well. And so keep that in mind. That's just kind of some feedback from several of the conversations that I found on TikTok in regards to church attendance from their Christian influencers. Now, one piece that I found really interesting, there were a lot of quotes and comments from what's considered the top 2024 TikTok Christian influencers. And so there was a person who was on there, his name is Father Moses, and someone commented on TikTok and says he makes spirituality feel more approachable in an online setting. 2024 was declared as the year for Mormon lifestyle influencers, online specifically. Gen Z desires to learn more about the historical accurate Jesus. And they feel they can do that on a better platform online. There was a follower, I didn't want to mention her name because of the number of followers that she has. So I'm going to call her KK. Let's just say that. So she encourages her 700,000 followers around the world on TikTok, mostly females, to find freedom from organized religion and to basically explore faith on their own terms. There was a 23-year-old who shares Buddhist philosophy on TikTok. She right now has 420,000 followers all over the world. The most influential, my opinion, Christian influencer that I found, he was a male. He has 3.4 million followers on TikTok alone. And he said that if you share content with him to stop scrolling, and if you say to him, because God wants me to tell you something, he is not going to listen to your content. Especially if you are a church that's in person, that's requesting for him to follow your in-person service online. So let me repeat that. If you say to this gentleman with 3.4 million followers, if you're in the sanctuary, he's watching you online, if you or he passes by, or somebody shares your service with him and you said, stop scrolling, God told me to tell you something, he is not going to pay attention to your platform, nor is he going to invite his followers to listen to your service that day. He went on to say, because he feels that God is not a clout chaser, and he will not send this to his friends, and he will not make any comments on your platform. In-person sanctuary, that's some serious food for thought. I just literally, if you add them up roughly, we're probably looking at close to 4 million people through different religious backgrounds. They support their faith from their own home through social media platforms only. Just wanted to give you some food for thought. There was I'm not laughing at this particular research piece that I found. I'm laughing because I've honestly never even thought of this before. I mentioned it to someone and we had a kind of interesting conversation about it. I won't say an argument. I'll just say we both had different perspectives. That's what I'll say. And so there is a user, according to a CNN report, his name is Keith. I think his last name is Carmini. And there's a Gen Z who has rewritten the Bible. And he has written it from the standpoint of helping it to be more readable and user-friendly. So basically, in his opinion, young people understand. Now, let me correct myself. I'm not going to say it's a male or a female, because one thing I do remember about the report, the person who wrote it did not want to be revealed because they said they had received a lot of threats. That surprised me about what they had put out to help the Bible be more understandable to Gen Z. So I want to read a passage from you that CNN referenced in the article as to what it's still considered the Bible. It's not titled the Holy Bible, but it's considered the Gen Z Lingo Bible was what it was titled. And so for those of you who don't know, there is a passage in the Bible that talks about when Jesus was sleeping on the boat and the winds came and the disciples were scared and the boat was rocking and the winds and the waves. I think it's in Mark 4:35 through 41. It's where it is today. Now, according to this is how he rewrote it, and I'm going to read it exactly how it reads in the Gen Z Lingo Bible. And it says, God is the top G, and the gospel is the holy T. It went on to say, the disciples were described as stressing hard, and they asked Jesus, bruh, you just gonna let the storm cook us? The divine bro responds by saying to the storm, bro, chill. And then the storm said, well, say less. And it stopped vibing. That was how they explained that story. Now, listen, it threw me off. These are my confessions. Just because it does not make sense to me, they are having a conversation about a biblical story. I've heard different opinions because I asked for them. I've heard without judgment. I heard, some people's opinions say, well, listen, as long as they're reading the Bible, what difference does it make? Who cares how they say it? I had another individual say, at least they know who Jesus is and is willing to acknowledge who he is. I've had just as many people say, listen, y'all, that's too far. The Holy Bible is what it is. There's no need to change it. There's no need to be disrespectful to God, be disrespectful to Jesus. Why would we make God or Jesus, they call it slang. God is not slang. Another individual gave me a perspective that I understand. They gave me the perspective of, why have we made religion so hard? Like, why do we dislike God so much? Why do we dislike Jesus? Why can't we stand back as humans and maybe take some responsibility as to why Gen Z feels like they need to create a new understanding of the Holy Bible in order to be interested in it? I had another individual who even commented on the portion about the TikTok followers. I think they were a little bit more blown away than I was, because the narrative that's been out there is that young people just don't go to church. Young people don't want to hear nothing you got to say. But in actuality, young people, it seems like through some of this research, they're just wanting to find a different way for you to say it. And so then for the body of Christ, the question becomes, why do they need to feel like they need a different way to hear it? What in some ways did we not prioritize, or did we over prioritize the importance of what they needed to learn? We always say faith comes by hearing, and hearing comes by the word of God. And how can they hear without a preacher? And how can that preacher preach unless he be sent? I think a lot of times what happens is we may not be giving our young people the foundational teaching, so it won't sound boring, so it won't feel boring. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I went to Sunday school. Sunday school wasn't boring for us. That's where some of my favorite friends were, because it wasn't just about me going into a building. It was about me learning how to build community. It was about me learning why it was important that I know who God is. Now, I didn't understand it when I was younger. As I got older and experienced life challenges and did certain things, I was kind of glad I had that foundation. I think it would have looked a little different if I didn't. And so the part that does trouble me is that there's a whole entire book that we can do one or two things. We can read it and try to understand. We can try to figure out why this person feels possibly detached from the Holy Bible itself as it is written. It's amazing, because if you do your research, I am still learning. Like, we learn from the King James Version, but there are so many different interpretations of the Bible now. Like, a lot of times I prefer the Message Bible, the New International. So is the Gen Z lingo so different that we can't take a second to understand it? I don't know. You tell me. I do know in these other versions that I read a lot of times, the context is still the same. They just will, and a lot of times, they will place the language in a way where it seems easier to understand. Look, this generation, they say bro. It drives me ragged, and I'll tell my nephews, say bro to me and see what happened. You know, brother is a male to me. I'm a girl. I'm not a bro. Don't call me bro. We fight about that all the time. And so, but that's their language that they use. It's a topic we need to talk about, because eventually we're going to reach a space where if the children feel like we're not really taking into consideration what their point of view is, they might not want to go in person or online. And if we're not careful, we could be potentially heading that way because, as I've said in previous shows, there is a generation that raised up that did not know the Lord. And if we're not careful, we may potentially be raising up that generation. Do you ever give that any thought? And why can't we have a simple conversation with someone who doesn't go to church? Why do we make that so hard? Why do we beat them up? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory. There is no perfect man. Let me tell you when man was perfect. Man was perfect before they went in the garden. That's the only time man was perfect. So there is no situation where you can feel like you can make someone feel bad because they don't do it the way you do it. But I will say this. In Hebrews 10:22 and 25 from the Message Bible, it says, so let's do it. Let's be full of belief. Let's be content that we are presentable, whether we're inside the house or outside of the house. But let's keep a firm promise, a grip that we know what we're doing and where we're going. Heaven or hell, you choose. He always keeps his word. Let's see, more importantly, if we can be inventive on ways to encourage, love, and help each other out. Not avoiding worship altogether, as some inspire to do, especially as we get closer to see the big day approaching. So is it more important to fight about whether we are in the house or outside of the house? Or is it more importantly that we figure out a common ground as to why we're in or don't want to be in that space? I think that's what we need to understand. And then Matthew 18:20 says, for where 2 or 3 gather together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. Again, I like going to church. I don't enjoy it as much as I used to going every Sunday, but a lot of that is because as a wife and as responsibilities that I have and the church that I'm currently a member of, I do have a good little commute. I've been there for a long time and I love teaching children's church. So I always make sure that on those Sundays I have the energy, the tenacity, because I love giving the children my full attention when I'm there. And you can best believe a lot of times, a lot of my kids that I've taught over the years are going to come visit me in class or see me in the hallway and need to talk to me about something. But those of you who are physically able to go in the building, I just want you to know sometimes it's nice to have someone to say good morning and meet you at the door and how you doing and hey, let me hold your seat. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. I have another friend of mine has not been able to come, but we text each other all the time. You good? I saw you. You all right? You need anything? And so a lot of times it's a good way to start building trust as well with individuals in person. Now, I am not naive. I know that we're going to an AI world. We're already in the WWW everything. But there are going to be some times where we need to interact with people in person. Heck, Being raised in church and speaking, doing Easter programs and, different things doing the church helped me to be able to be comfortable to talk to you even today. It was a practicing point for me. I learned how to become a speaker doing church services. I learned how to slow down, how to be mindful, not to take certain words personal. I feel like I actually learned how to accept constructive criticism going in person to the church and being in a community of believers who saw the potential of me being able to interact with individuals, like being a mentor, and gave me feedback and gave me the opportunity to practice to do so. Not saying I couldn't find those things, those tips and tools online. I'm just saying I'm more of a, I need in person. In person helps me grow. And so I guess that's the audience that I'm talking to today. If online works better for you, not a problem. If in person works okay for you, that's even better. I can help you with that. All right. And then I want to leave you with this one last verse, Psalms 122:1. It says, I was glad when they came to me. Let us go to the house of the Lord. But you got to make sure when you go in, if you don't feel comfortable, you need to pray about it. And there are so many churches in the world. There are little churches. There are big churches. I often hear this term mega church. I'm not sure where that came from. But when you find a space that feels good to your heart, find a community of people that will help you be comfortable growing. And I promise you, some of you that are online visitors, go try it once. And maybe some of you that go in person, maybe view online and see what that experience is about. I'm a little partial to those people who like both. I like people who actually are fine going in person as well as attending online. I don't see a problem with that at all. And so in my closing point, I just want you to know, in a world that's so full of change and uncertainty, it is essential for you to remember that the unchanging nature of God and the timeless wisdom that we have in the Holy Bible and the teachings are never going to change. The Bible is not just a collection of ancient texts, but a living guide that speaks to the heart and the souls of those who seek it for that reason and that purpose. By holding steadfast to its teachings and resisting the urge to dilute the message, we honor the holiness and the sovereignty of God. Let's try to bridge the gap between this modern society and divine truth. Let's show that serving God doesn't matter whether you're doing in person or if you're doing it online. But if you need to be in person, it's okay. Just find a service that works for you. But the most important part is I want you to make sure that you have a foundation that has life and not death. Because the hardest thing that all of us never want to talk about, but is right there in the Bible, you're going to live like we do. And there's going to be a season where we're going to die. And I want you to be in a place where what works for you and works for your heart is full of love, full of joy, and full of peace. I hope that you found something beneficial in this episode today. I'd like to hear your comments. You guys will be surprised. This is a hot topic on social media. There are a lot of people mad at us in the church right now. There's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions. And I think in order for us to grow from it, we have to agree. We say all the time, we can agree to disagree, but I think in all fairness, we need to at least be willing to hear people's opinions. But then at the same time, people bring opinions, bring them in love, so people won't feel defensive. You can come hurt. We're okay with that. You can feel like there's something that you just want to explore. We can deal with that too. But we have got to find a way to become a community again in the church and stop hurting each other. I say this all the time in my personal studies. Now is the time for the saints to rise up and possess the kingdom. Are you willing to do your part? And are you ready to do your part? And what does that look like for you? You take the keys. You run with them. You hold steadfast. You stay unmovable, always abiding in the place that God raised you to be in, because before you were formed in your mother's womb, He knew you and He created you to be a prophet to the nation. Until we talk on the next show, I hope that you learned something today. I hope that you will take it in. I hope you'll be a better you. And I look forward to growing with you in 2025.